Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? That question had followed Sarah Brennan for years, through rooms filled with uniforms, medals, and men who spoke too loudly when they felt uncertain. But on this morning, standing at the edge of a fog-choked naval checkpoint, it wasn't about respect. It was about access, and access was everything. The fog rolled thick across Naval Station Norfolk, a curtain of white that blurred everything into stillness. The checkpoint's floodlights cut through in pale cones, their beams dissolving just 20 feet ahead. Corporal Derek Martinez rubbed his gloved hands together, trying to chase off the cold. Another slow morning, another rotation of duty, another test of patience. He didn't know that within minutes, this ordinary watch would become the most memorable of his career. From the gray void emerged the outline of a car, a silver sedan, headlights dim, the engine's low hum swallowed by mist. Martinez's training kicked in automatically. Stand centered, posture straight, one hand near the holster, the other raised in signal. The car rolled to a gentle stop, no hesitation, no nervous revving. When the window lowered, Martinez saw a woman in her early 40s. She wasn't in uniform. No insignia, no visible credentials. Just jeans, a simple gray sweater, and calm eyes that looked directly at him, not around him, as if she already knew how this would go. "Good morning, ma'am. ID and authorization, please," Martinez said, voice even. She handed over a Virginia driver's license, Dr. Sarah Brennan, Alexandria address, civilian. Martinez glanced up, already uneasy. "Dr. Brennan, this is a restricted installation. I'll need to see your Department of Defense credentials." She nodded, reaching into her bag, every motion deliberate, careful, unthreatening. From within, she produced a duty contractor badge. It caught the light briefly, official hologram intact, photograph matching. Everything seemed legitimate, almost too legitimate. Martinez frowned. "Secret clearance only. Building 47's on your access request. That's a top-secret SCI minimum facility." "I'm aware," she said, her voice steady, almost patient. "The authorization memo came through Cybercom yesterday." He turned toward the booth, pulling up the access log. No such name appeared. No memo, no email, nothing. He checked again, slower this time, certain he'd missed something, but the list was clean. When he returned, she was still waiting. "I'm sorry, ma'am, there's nothing here for a Dr. Brennan." She didn't argue. "Could you contact the security office? They should have it." Behind her, a Navy pickup truck idled, the driver tapping impatient fingers against the wheel. The fog was thinning, the base slowly waking. Martinez exhaled, keying his radio. "Alpha 7 to command. I need verification for civilian Dr. Sarah Brennan. Claims access to Building 47 under Cybercom authority." His supervisor, Staff Sergeant Reeves, responded, voice thick with static. "Hold her there. I'll be down." Minutes passed, long enough for the world to shift subtly from routine to uncertain. When Reeves arrived, he wore the expression of a man who'd seen too many excuses. He approached, broad-shouldered, authoritative, the kind of presence that made junior personnel straighten reflexively. "Good morning, ma'am," Reeves said. "I understand there's an issue." Sarah explained again, same calm tone, same careful precision. She mentioned Operation Sentinel Shield. Reeves squinted. "Never heard of it." "It's compartmentalized," she replied, "but Commander Peterson should have been briefed." Reeves stepped away, phone pressed to his ear. Martinez could see the growing line of vehicles, 7 now, headlights cutting through thinning fog. A Navy lieutenant in the pickup finally stepped out, frustration written all over his face. "What's the holdup?" he demanded. "Verification process, sir," Martinez said evenly. "We'll be done shortly." The lieutenant leaned toward Sarah's car. "Ma'am, if you don't have authorization, you need to clear the gate. Some of us have work to do." She looked at him without irritation. "I understand. This will be resolved soon." Her composure unnerved him. Reeves returned empty-handed. Nothing in the system, no operation by that name. Commander Peterson's assistant says no appointment scheduled, no record of you. Sarah blinked once, then softly. Could you contact Admiral Keating's office? The air seemed to still. Even the engines idling nearby felt quieter. Reeves stared. Ma'am, Admiral James Keating. Yes, he can confirm my authorization. The lieutenant laughed outright. Lady, I've been stationed here 8 years and never even seen that man. You expect us to believe he's waiting on you. Sarah didn't respond. She didn't need to. From beyond the barrier, headlights appeared, a black SUV with government plates moving fast. It stopped abruptly near the booth. 2 armed security personnel stepped out, followed by a tall man in khakis, sharp posture, graying hair. Captain Morrison, base security chief. He scanned the scene like someone reading a report before it was written. Sergeant Reeves, he barked. Status. Reeves straightened. Civilian claims access to 47, says her authorization was pre-cleared, mentions Admiral Keating. Morrison turned toward Sarah, assessing. Ma'am, that's a serious claim. Do you understand the consequences of misrepresentation? I do, Sarah replied evenly. If you contact Commander Vasquez, Admiral Keating's chief of staff, she'll confirm. Morrison frowned. How do you know that name? Because I briefed her yesterday. There was something in her tone, calm, factual, unshakable, that made Morrison hesitate. He pulled out his phone, stepping away. The conversation was short. When he returned, his entire demeanor had shifted. Dr. Brennan, he said quietly, I've been informed Admiral Keating is on his way here personally. The lieutenant's smirk vanished. Martinez's stomach tightened. In the entire history of Alpha 7, no admiral had ever come to the gate. 3 minutes later, another SUV rolled in, smaller flag on the bumper, twin stars glinting faintly in the clearing fog. The admiral stepped out, uniform immaculate, movements precise. He didn't speak until every enlisted man snapped to attention. At ease, he said. He walked directly to Sarah's car, stopping just a few feet away. For a moment, he simply looked at her, a faint curve of recognition in his expression. Dr. Brennan, Admiral Keating said, my apologies for the delay. There seems to have been a communications failure. Sarah opened her door and stood. For the first time, Martinez noticed her posture, balanced, deliberate, confident, without arrogance. She wasn't surprised. She'd expected this. No apology necessary, Admiral, she said softly. Your people were doing their jobs. Keating turned to the assembled men. Gentlemen, Dr. Sarah Brennan is the Director of Cyber Defense Integration for the Atlantic Fleet. She oversees the cybersecurity infrastructure for this entire sector. A pause hung in the air, the kind that humbles. She holds full SCI clearance and direct access authority to every classified facility on this base, including those under my command. Reeves's face drained of color. Martinez felt his chest tighten. The lieutenant, once smug, now stood rigid, staring straight ahead. Furthermore, Keating continued, Dr. Brennan designed the very systems you rely on. The security protocols you enforce every day, they exist because of her. No one spoke. The fog had thinned entirely now, sunlight breaking through like a quiet revelation. Sarah gave a small nod. Your people followed protocol exactly as they should. Don't fault them for doing their jobs right. Keating's voice softened. Morrison, get her credentials updated immediately. She has flag-level access. And find out why our systems didn't update. Yes, sir. Sarah turned back to Martinez and Reeves. You both did exactly what you were trained to do. That's what keeps places like this safe. Never apologize for diligence. Her tone wasn't condescending. It was gratitude cloaked in professionalism. It left an impression deeper than any reprimand. Keating leaned toward her window as she prepared to leave. Commander Vasquez will meet you at 47. The assessment team's waiting. As her sedan passed the raised barrier, the line of waiting vehicles began to move again, each driver silent, almost reverent. Reeves exhaled. "In your report, note that we followed procedure." "Already planning to, Sergeant," Martinez said quietly. The lieutenant climbed back into his truck without a word. For most, the incident would be forgotten by the next shift change, but not for Sarah. Inside Building 47, unmarked, discreet, buried in the heart of Norfolk, Commander Lisa Vasquez waited with a tablet under her arm. "Dr. Brennan, my apologies for the checkpoint issue," she said as Sarah approached. "No harm done," Sarah replied. "It was instructive." They passed through multiple layers of authentication: retina scans, keycards, voice verifications. Then the elevator descended 2 levels underground. The operations center opened up before them, walls lined with monitors, world maps glowing with shifting data. The hum of servers filled the space like a low heartbeat. Dozens of analysts worked in synchronized silence, every keystroke feeding a vast, invisible defense. Admiral Keating stood near a conference table, surrounded by officers from multiple commands. When Sarah entered, conversation stilled. He turned toward the room. "Before we begin, Dr. Brennan spent 12 years as an Air Force cyber warfare officer. She's forgotten more about intrusion methodology than most of us will ever learn. When she speaks, listen." Sarah connected her laptop, screens flickering to life. "Over the next 3 days," she began, "we'll evaluate the Atlantic Fleet's cyber defense posture. In the past 6 months, there have been 17 intrusion attempts. 12 were caught automatically. 3 were detected later. 2 succeeded and went unnoticed for days." The silence in the room thickened. Captain Rodriguez frowned. "We weren't informed of any successful penetrations." "Because they were ours," Sarah said. "Test intrusions. My team conducted them." She let the words sink in before continuing. "We wanted to see if your systems could withstand social engineering. They couldn't." Her tone wasn't accusatory. It was factual, surgical. "I didn't hack your servers," she continued. "I hacked your people." Gasps and murmurs rippled quietly through the room. Sarah turned the screen, showing logs, message chains, harmless-seeming phishing emails that had led to access points. Each vulnerability represents a person who clicked something they shouldn't. Each success began with trust. For 2 hours, she moved methodically through her findings: authentication lapses, monitoring blind spots, outdated encryption nodes. But what struck the officers most wasn't her technical command. It was her composure. She never raised her voice, never humiliated anyone. She spoke like someone who understood the difference between mistakes and weakness. When the session ended, Sarah stayed behind, eyes fixed on the network traffic feed. Patterns scrolled across her screen like coded whispers. Something unusual: repetitive access attempts, odd timing intervals, authorized credentials but suspicious behavior. Lieutenant Daniels' account. She leaned closer, fingers poised. Not yet an alarm, but something wasn't right. "Chief," she called softly to the night shift supervisor, "how long has this been happening?" "About a week, ma'am. Comes from a legitimate account, so no alerts." "It should have triggered one," Sarah said. "Even legitimate users can be compromised." She logged everything: time, IP, access route, her mind already building connections. This was no routine anomaly. Outside, Norfolk's night pressed silent against the underground walls. Inside, the hum of the servers never stopped, the sound of an invisible war continuing in the dark. She hadn't slept, not really. Just closed her eyes long enough for the glow of the monitors to fade from memory. The kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from lack of rest, but from carrying too much silence. When Sarah returned to the operations center the next morning, the air felt different. Quieter, expectant. The hum of servers, the muted chatter, the scent of coffee that had gone stale hours ago, everything carried the same rhythm, but there was a subtle shift beneath it. The way people watched her now, respect mixed with unease. Admiral Keating was already there, speaking with Commander Vasquez near the large threat display. His voice was calm but clipped, the tone of someone who knew bad news was coming and preferred it fast. Sarah placed her laptop on the table and began connecting to the network. She didn't greet them right away. Instead, she waited until the Admiral turned toward her, that familiar sternness in his face softened slightly by fatigue. "You didn't go home," he said. "No, sir," she replied. "Something in last night's data didn't add up." Vasquez raised an eyebrow, another test intrusion. Sarah shook her head, "Not this time." She brought up the logs, cascading lines of timestamps and access events. The screen filled with data so dense most people saw only noise. But to Sarah, it was a language, one she'd learned to read long before anyone had thought cyber warfare was real war. "These access attempts," she said, pointing, "they're automated but patterned. Whoever's behind them is smart enough to mimic human intervals. The problem is the source. It's coming from Lieutenant Daniels' credentials." Rodriguez frowned. "Daniels, he's one of ours, solid record, no anomalies." "I'm not accusing him," Sarah said, "but his account is being used in ways that don't match his behavior. Either someone's inside or someone's using him." A silence fell across the table. Every officer there knew what that implied, an insider breach. The one threat every system fears because it's born from within. Keating crossed his arms. "You're sure?" Sarah nodded, "As sure as I can be without a full audit." He turned to Vasquez. "Find Daniels quietly." Within 20 minutes, Lieutenant Daniels arrived, still in his undershirt, clearly woken from quarters nearby. He looked more confused than alarmed, like someone called in for an inspection that didn't make sense. "Sir," he asked. Keating gestured toward Sarah. "Dr. Brennan has detected unusual activity from your account." Daniels blinked. "Activity? I haven't logged in outside my normal shifts." "Your home system," Sarah said gently. "Do you access work remotely?" "Sometimes. My kid uses the same laptop. He plays online games." Her expression tightened. "Did he download anything recently? Mods, cheat tools?" He hesitated a beat too long. "Yeah, something like that. Why?" Sarah exchanged a glance with the Admiral. "Because that's how they got in." The color drained from Daniel's face. He sat slowly, realization dawning like a slow bruise. "My God." Sarah began typing, connecting to the audit servers. "We'll need to assume the worst. Whoever breached his home network captured his credentials and tunneled in." Vasquez exhaled. "Meaning what exactly?" "Meaning they had legitimate access to everything he could see," Sarah said. "And if they were careful, we wouldn't have noticed for weeks." Keating's voice was calm, but the weight behind it was unmistakable. "How much damage are we talking?" Sarah didn't answer right away. Instead, she began a live trace on the compromised account. The map on the wall came alive with shifting points of light, data routes, server handshakes, the slow pulse of an attack that had already burrowed deep. "These aren't random," she said. "They're targeting operational planning databases, personnel records, and system architecture documentation. They're building a complete picture who we are, how we move, what we're capable of." The Admiral stepped closer, eyes fixed on the glowing map. "Find out what they took." "It'll take hours," Sarah said quietly. "Maybe all day." "Then start now." For the next 6 hours, she barely looked up. Her fingers moved in steady, precise patterns, commands flowing like music through the terminal. Around her, the room grew still except for the low whir of equipment. People watched, but no one spoke. She was doing what few could, tracing shadows through invisible lines of code, following the ghost of an adversary that never slept. At one point, Vasquez approached, holding a mug of coffee. "You've been at it for 4 hours." Sarah didn't glance away. "So have they." The trace led across encrypted nodes, jumping continents, Singapore, Bucharest, St. Petersburg. It was like chasing smoke. Every digital footprint was disguised, layered beneath proxies. But the deeper she went, the more familiar the pattern felt. "I've seen this before," she murmured. "Where?" Vasquez asked. "Afghanistan, 2011. They called themselves Crimson Current. We never proved the attribution, but the signatures match. It's the same operators, are patient, precise, disciplined." Keating's voice came from behind her. "Nation-state." "Yes," Sarah said, "and not just any, the kind that waits, the kind that watches." When the report finally compiled, Sarah turned from the monitor. They accessed 3 critical areas: fleet exercise plans, weapons system upgrades, and personnel assignments related to intelligence operations. "It's all compromised." The room went dead silent. Keating's jaw tightened. "Recommendations." Immediate credential rotation. Network lockdown for all affected nodes. Change operational plans, brief all compromised personnel. We can contain it, but only if we move fast. He nodded once. "Do it." And just like that, the room erupted into motion. Officers shouted orders into radios, analysts typed furiously, command channels flared to life. It wasn't panic, it was controlled urgency, the kind that only came when the stakes were high enough to taste. Sarah coordinated from the center, issuing commands with calm precision. "Segment Alpha, isolate subnet 3. Beta, rotate credentials, double factor. Command Delta, initiate forensic mirrors. Nobody reboots without clearance." To the untrained eye, it looked like chaos. To her, it was choreography, a symphony of containment. Hours passed. One by one, network nodes stabilized. Systems re-authenticated. The immediate threat was contained but not eliminated. Near midnight, she leaned back, rubbing her eyes. Keating stood nearby, watching her. "Whoever did this," he said, "they weren't just looking for intel." "No," Sarah replied quietly. "They were testing us, measuring our response time." He frowned. "To what end?" "To know how fast we can react when something real begins." The Admiral studied her, then said softly, "You think this was preparation?" "I think it was rehearsal," Sarah answered. The words hung in the air, heavy as truth. Vasquez sat down opposite her, her expression tight. "How do you live with that, knowing there's no finish line, just another breach waiting to happen?" Sarah looked at her, eyes tired but unwavering. "You don't live with it, you live for it." There was a long silence. Outside, the world had gone dark again. Inside, the glow of the screens made every face look older. When dawn came, the crisis had stabilized. Reports were drafted, damage assessed, passwords rotated, systems locked. The immediate danger was over on paper. But Sarah knew better. Every system fixed today would fail again tomorrow in a different way. Security wasn't about perfection, it was about persistence. 3 days later, she stood once more before the senior staff. The fog that had once blanketed the gate was gone, replaced by crisp autumn sunlight. Her voice was steady as she concluded her report. "The incident highlights a simple truth: the strongest defenses can still fall if one person becomes the weak link. Security isn't a technology problem, it's a human one." Keating nodded. "You're saying we can't patch people?" "I'm saying we can train them," she replied, "if we're willing to care enough." After the briefing, she walked outside, into the rare quiet of the base courtyard. The air smelled faintly of sea and metal, the scent of places that never truly sleep. She leaned against a railing, watching the harbor lights blink against the morning sky. Commander Vasquez joined her. "You handled that better than most generals would have." Sarah smiled faintly. "Experience helps." "Air Force, right? 12 years. 13, Sarah corrected softly. "But the last year didn't count. Too much politics, not enough purpose." Vasquez studied her. "What made you leave?" Sarah's eyes didn't move from the horizon. "A mistake, one that cost people their trust. I told myself I'd never let complacency happen again. It wasn't something she liked talking about, but it explained everything: her calm under pressure, her intolerance for assumptions, her quiet defiance of rank. Vasquez didn't push. For what it's worth, she said, people here already trust you. Sarah nodded, though she didn't answer. Trust was earned through vigilance, and vigilance meant never relaxing enough to believe you'd earned it. Later that night, long after most had gone home, Sarah remained in the operations room, alone again. The faint hum of the servers felt almost like breathing. She pulled up one last terminal window, the full trace of the breach path, unfiltered. There, buried deep in the encrypted traffic, she found it: a small, almost invisible data packet. A signature, a message. Not words, just a line of code meaningless to most, but she understood it instantly. It was the same pattern she'd seen a decade ago, buried in an Air Force satellite uplink. Back when her unit had intercepted an attack that came too late to stop. Back when she'd sworn she'd never ignore her instincts again. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She didn't open the file, not yet. Some truths waited for their moment, and hers would come soon enough. Outside, the base slept under the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant crash of waves. Inside, a single woman kept watch over invisible front lines, a war that would never make the evening news. Somewhere between exhaustion and purpose, Sarah found the rhythm again, the quiet heartbeat of those who guard without being seen. And as the last light on her monitor dimmed, she whispered to herself, words no one else would hear. Let them come, we'll be ready this time. Why did the summons come at dawn? That question haunted Sarah as the black sedan rolled silently through Washington's waking streets, headlights cutting through the faint drizzle that blurred the Pentagon's distant outline. She sat in the back seat, fingers resting loosely on a folder she hadn't been asked to bring, but couldn't leave behind. 3 weeks had passed since the breach at Norfolk. 3 weeks of audits, reports, debriefs, and sleepless nights replaying every detail. The incident had been contained, yes, but what it revealed was larger than any single attack. It was systemic, predictable, human. Now Cyber Command wanted answers. The car passed through security gates and stopped before the river entrance, where gray stone met the pale light of early morning. Sarah stepped out, adjusting the collar of her coat against the wind. She looked like she always did, calm, controlled, anonymous. But inside, her mind was already racing through probabilities, potential motives, political traps disguised as questions. A Navy aide met her. Dr. Brennan, this way. They walked in silence down a long corridor that smelled faintly of paper and coffee, the scent of bureaucracy. The walls here were lined with portraits, admirals, generals, men who'd commanded fleets and armies. Their faces stared out in immortal confidence. Sarah had never trusted portraits. They didn't show the doubt, the fatigue, or the human cost behind the medals. The aide stopped outside a heavy door. They're waiting for you inside, ma'am. Sarah took a breath, steadied herself, and stepped in. The room was dimly lit, a long conference table stretching beneath recessed lights. Admiral Keating sat at one end, his uniform impeccable as always, his gaze steady. Beside him were officers from multiple branches: Air Force, Army, Navy, Marines, and one civilian in a dark suit whose silence radiated authority. Dr. Brennan, Keating began, his tone formal but not cold. Thank you for coming. Sarah nodded slightly. You said it was urgent. It is. The man in the suit leaned forward. The breach at Norfolk triggered a full-spectrum audit. We've found similar vulnerabilities at 5 other installations. Your methods, your approach, prevented a catastrophic intelligence loss. He paused, letting the weight of that sink in. We'd like you to lead a new organization, Joint Service Oversight, Cyber Assessment and Integrity Division, direct access to any command, any system, any operation. Sarah's hands rested quietly on the table. How much authority? Full, you'd report directly to Cyber Command leadership. No intermediaries, no politics. She studied their faces. There's always politics. The man smiled faintly. Not if you move fast enough. Admiral Keating interjected. Sarah, this isn't just a promotion, it's recognition. What you did at Norfolk, it changed doctrine. We want you to institutionalize it. Sarah said nothing for a long moment. Her eyes drifted toward the window, thin light filtering through the blinds, casting striped shadows across the table. Finally she spoke. You're asking me to become visible. The civilian frowned. I'm not sure I understand. My effectiveness, Sarah said quietly, comes from being underestimated. The moment people know who I am, what I do, they'll start preparing for my assessments instead of operating naturally. You won't see the truth anymore, just rehearsed compliance. Keating's expression softened. Then we'll keep you invisible. Small teams, minimal profile, no public briefings, different covers. You'll choose how and when to appear. Sarah looked at him, this man who'd once met her at a foggy gate, who'd believed her when others doubted. There was trust there, the kind that only forms through shared crisis. She thought about Daniels, the officer whose son had unknowingly opened a door to an adversary. About the guilt in his eyes, the quiet devastation that came from realizing you endangered what you swore to protect. She thought about the young corporal at the gate, Martinez, who'd followed protocol even when doubt crept in. And she thought about herself, about how every success came wrapped in another layer of isolation. Finally she said, I'll do it on one condition. Keating nodded, name it. Every vulnerability we find gets fixed, not just documented, not just reported. The room was silent. The civilian leaned back, studying her with a mix of respect and calculation. Agreed, he said. It was done. When she left the Pentagon that morning, the sky had cleared. The Potomac shimmered beneath the first rays of sunlight, calm and deceptive. She stood there for a moment, watching the water flow beneath the bridge, constant, unstoppable. That's how the work felt now. Endless but necessary. Weeks later, Sarah sat in a quiet coffee shop in Arlington. No uniform, no insignia, just her and a laptop that never seemed to rest. Around her, life moved normally, students with earbuds, business people scrolling through emails, a barista humming softly behind the counter. Ordinary noise for ordinary people. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. You don't know me, but I'm Sergeant Reeves's daughter. He tells me about the day you came through his checkpoint, how you handled it. He says it changed the way he sees leadership. Thank you. Sarah smiled, small, genuine, fleeting. She typed a short reply. Your father did everything right. Tell him I said that. She set the phone down, looking out the window. The street was alive with movement, buses, laughter, dogs on leashes. None of them would ever know how close they'd come to losing something invisible yet vital. That was the paradox of her world. The better she did her job, the less anyone would notice. Her reflection in the window looked almost tired. But there was something else there, quiet pride, maybe even peace. Her phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a text, it was an alert from her encrypted channel. One of her new teams, Marine Corps Base Quantico, a flagged anomaly. She opened it immediately. Potential lateral breach detected during routine audit. Awaiting directive. Sarah's mind shifted gears instantly, fatigue evaporating. She began typing commands into her terminal, remotely accessing the Marine base's audit logs. The pattern was subtle but familiar, small deviations, time-staggered queries. It wasn't a hack, not yet. It was a whisper, a probe. She composed a response. Initiate containment quietly. No alerts. Send me the raw traffic in real time. As data scrolled across her screen, her pulse slowed, not from calm but from focus. This was her world now. Invisible lines of battle drawn not in sand or sky, but in silence. She'd seen enough of the old wars, the kind fought with noise and explosions. This war was different. It was fought in the unseen places, where a single click could change the fate of a nation. An hour later, the breach attempt was neutralized. Just another invisible victory. She leaned back, closing her laptop. Around her, the world continued, untouched, unaware. A young woman at the next table was laughing softly, scrolling through photos on her phone. Sarah smiled faintly, realizing that was the point. The world was supposed to stay unaware. Keating called that evening. "How's the new job?" he asked. "Busy," she said. 11 assessments scheduled next quarter, maybe 12 if I don't sleep." He chuckled. "You've built something important. People are listening, understanding that security isn't just about firewalls, it's about people." Sarah looked out her apartment window at the city below, the constant movement, the endless signals bouncing through invisible space. Somewhere out there, adversaries were probing, learning, adapting. And somewhere else, her teams were doing the same, staying one step ahead. "We're making progress," she said, "one assessment at a time." For a moment, neither spoke. Then the Admiral said quietly, "Sarah, do you ever miss the fight?" She smiled faintly. "This is the fight, we just learned to fight it differently." After the call ended, she stood by the window for a long while. The city lights shimmered like constellations, each one a point of connection, of risk, of possibility. She thought of Daniels again, of his son, of the fragile line between ignorance and intent. People called her work invisible, but she'd learned the truth. Visibility was overrated. The real battles happened in silence, in the hearts and minds of those who refused to give up. She turned off the light, letting the glow of the city fill the room. The quiet hum of her laptop was the only sound left. And in that stillness, she whispered, not as a promise but as a reminder. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Why did the truth always come wrapped in silence? The hum of the aircraft filled the cabin, low and constant, the kind of sound that dissolved thought if you let it. Sarah Brennan sat by the window, her reflection ghosting over the clouds below. The jet was unmarked, its tail number classified. Officially, this flight didn't exist. It was her first field audit as director of the new division, her first mission under a name that didn't belong to her. The folder in her lap read, Project Aegis, Pacific Command Network Review. Unofficially, she was there to test an admiral who'd spent 2 decades mastering how to hide behind success. She closed the folder, resting her hand on the cover. For weeks she prepared her team, a small group of analysts she trusted enough to bring into shadows. Each had been briefed separately. None knew the full scope. That was how it had to be. 20 minutes to landing, the pilot said through the intercom. Sarah nodded absently. Her mind wasn't on the landing, it was on what waited at the end of it. Another base, another room full of men who'd see her as an inconvenience until she proved otherwise. When the plane touched down at Andersen Air Base, Guam, the heat hit like a wall. Humid, dense, alive with the scent of fuel and ocean. She stepped out, hair tied back, sunglasses shielding her eyes. To most observers, she could have been anyone, an analyst, a liaison, a civilian on a short assignment. A Navy commander was waiting by the tarmac. "Dr. Brennan," he said, extending a hand. "Commander Holt, Base Operations." "Commander," she said, shaking his hand. "Thank you for arranging the logistics." His tone was polite but rehearsed. "We've set up a workspace for your team. Admiral Pierce has been briefed on your arrival. He'll meet you at 1400. She nodded. "Good. Until then, I want full access to your network activity logs, internal security protocols, and personnel authentication records." Holt blinked, momentarily thrown off by the bluntness. "Of course, I'll have my staff." "No staff," Sarah interrupted gently. "Only cleared personnel from my team. I want unfiltered data." He hesitated, then nodded. "Understood." Inside the operations center, her team was already at work, 3 analysts, all in civilian attire. Each screen flickered with scrolling code, data traces, system architecture maps. Sarah moved among them quietly, eyes scanning, questions forming. Every so often she'd pause, tilt her head slightly, then continue, the rhythm of someone who listened more than she spoke. Within an hour she noticed something subtle. Log entries overwritten, timestamps rounded instead of precise. At first glance it looked like normal compression, but the deeper she went, the less normal it became. She leaned over her lead analyst's shoulder. "What do you see here?" He squinted. "Routine scrub, probably system optimization." "Probably," she repeated softly. "Then, run a deep audit on those sequences. Check for hidden flags." Minutes later his voice faltered. "Ma'am, this isn't compression, it's deletion." Sarah felt it like a shift in air pressure. "Show me." The screen revealed a chain of log entries systematically erased, entire authentication events removed from the network history. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to make it look clean. She straightened slowly. "Who has this level of access?" "Only senior command, system administrators, maybe the admiral himself." "Or someone covering for him," she said quietly. At 1400, Admiral Pierce greeted her in his office, a large window overlooking the Pacific, sunlight glinting off metals that lined the wall behind him. He was every bit the image of authority, tall, composed, voice like gravel polished by years of command. "Dr. Brennan," he said, smiling thinly, "welcome to Guam. I hear you've been shaking up the East Coast." "I try not to shake," Sarah replied. "Just listen to the noise underneath." He chuckled, but his eyes didn't. "I understand you're here for a readiness assessment." "Yes, Admiral. Comprehensive. I'll need unrestricted access to your systems and personnel." Pierce leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "We run one of the cleanest operations in the Pacific. You won't find anything interesting here." "I hope you're right," Sarah said. "Interesting usually means expensive." For the next 2 hours she asked questions, calm, methodical, each one inching closer to a line he clearly didn't want crossed. His answers were smooth, practiced. But every now and then she caught small fractures, the kind that only appear when truth rubs against habit. When the meeting ended, Pierce stood. "I assume you'll share your preliminary findings before you leave." "I'll send a summary," she said, "once we've finished verifying the data." Something in her tone made him pause. For the first time his composure flickered. That night in the dimly lit workspace her team had set up, Sarah reviewed the deleted logs again. Layer by layer, she reconstructed what had been hidden. The pattern that emerged wasn't random, it was deliberate. Access from an external endpoint disguised as a maintenance server. The deleted entries corresponded with classified file transfers. "Someone's moving data off-site," she murmured. Her second analyst frowned. "To where?" Sarah zoomed in. "Not where, who?" The trail ended inside the base, routed through an auxiliary server maintained by a civilian contractor. "Local." She nodded slowly. "Looks like it, and whoever they are, they knew exactly what to erase." By midnight she had a name, Elliot Corin, systems engineer, cleared for maintenance support. No prior incidents, no red flags. "Too clean," she said softly. "People who make no mistakes usually make the biggest ones." The next morning, she requested a quiet interview. Corin arrived nervous, but not fearful. The kind of nervous that came from being called into a room by someone you couldn't read. "Mr. Corin," she said gently, gesturing for him to sit. "You've been with the contractor team for 5 years, correct?" "Yes, ma'am." "And your access privileges include server maintenance for restricted nodes?" "Yes, ma'am. Only routine work, though. I don't touch classified content." Sarah nodded, scrolling through her tablet. "These timestamps show you logged into node 7C 3 nights ago." He frowned. No, that's impossible. I was home. Ask anyone. Her voice softened. Elliot, if this was a mistake, now's the time to say so. Accidents happen, but falsifying logs is another matter. His composure cracked. I didn't falsify anything. I was told to run diagnostics. By who? He hesitated. Admiral Pierce's aide said it was part of a systems test. I didn't think twice. Sarah's pulse slowed, controlled. Did you verify the request? He looked down. No, ma'am. She leaned back, the faintest sigh escaping her. Not anger, sadness. Elliot, do you understand what that access did? It transferred secure operational data outside of this facility. Classified data. Someone used you. His face went pale. God, I didn't know. I believe you, she said quietly, but believing you doesn't undo what's been done. When he left, her team immediately began cross-verifying the aide's credentials. Within an hour, they uncovered the truth. The aide's account had been spoofed, cloned by someone with intimate access to administrative permissions. Sarah stared at the data. There was only one person with that level of control. Admiral Pierce. The confrontation came quietly. No shouting, no threats, just two people sitting across from each other in the Admiral's office while the Pacific wind moved faintly through the blinds. Sarah placed a printed report on his desk. You had your aide's credentials duplicated to authorize transfers from restricted nodes. That's espionage, Admiral. Internal or external, it doesn't matter. The data left this base under your authority. Pierce's jaw tightened. You're making a dangerous assumption. I don't make assumptions, she said, only assessments. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he smiled, not kindly. Do you have any idea what kind of enemies I've made keeping this region stable? What happens if one of them leaks half-truths to make me look compromised? Sarah's eyes didn't waver. Then you report it. You don't rewrite your own system to hide it. He leaned forward. You think you understand loyalty, but loyalty isn't black and white, Doctor. Sometimes the mission means bending rules you don't understand. Integrity isn't the enemy of mission, she replied. It's the foundation of it. They sat in silence for several long seconds. Finally, Pierce spoke, his voice low. You're going to write your report. You'll recommend disciplinary action. You'll destroy a man's career to protect a principle. Sarah stood slowly. I don't destroy careers, Admiral. People do that themselves. As she walked to the door, he said, You ever wonder how long you'll last doing this job that way? She paused, her hand on the handle. Every day. Then, turning slightly, but I still do it. That evening, she stood alone at the edge of the airfield, the sun bleeding into the Pacific. The wind tugged at her hair, warm and salty. Her plane was refueling nearby, engines quiet, waiting. Vasquez's voice came through her earpiece. Headquarters received your report. They're dispatching investigators. Sarah's tone was even. Good. Make sure the team doesn't touch any of the servers until they arrive. You okay? She looked toward the horizon, eyes narrowing slightly. No one's ever okay when they have to choose between truth and loyalty. A long pause. You did the right thing. Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. The right thing doesn't always feel right. As the engines roared to life behind her, she took one last look at the fading light. Every mission left a mark. Some were visible. Others lived quietly beneath the surface, small, permanent fractures in the soul. When she boarded, the pilot asked, Where to next, ma'am? Sarah didn't answer immediately. She looked out the window as the runway lights flickered in sequence, a path forward, bright but uncertain. Finally, she said, Home for now. The plane lifted into the dusk, leaving behind another layer of silence, another secret sealed beneath classified clearance. In the reflection of the window, her face looked calm again, but her eyes told the truth. Some battles aren't fought to win. They're fought to remember who you are. Why did silence always echo louder after a victory? Washington was gray again. Cold rain streaked the glass of the office windows, tracing uneven lines across the city's blurred reflection. The world outside moved, indifferent, but inside the walls of Cyber Command, everything felt suspended like the air before a storm. Sarah sat at the long conference table, hands folded loosely on a closed folder. Across from her, Admiral Keating stood by the window, his posture rigid, his reflection a faint silhouette against the clouds. "You did what you were sent to do," he said quietly. "The investigation confirmed your findings. Admiral Pierce is being relieved of duty pending court-martial." Sarah nodded once, but there was no satisfaction in her expression. He compromised classified systems. That had to be exposed. Keating turned, studying her. "You also exposed one of our own. That carries a cost." "I'm aware." He walked closer, lowering his voice. "You've made enemies, Sarah, important ones. Some are already whispering about overreach, about your team operating without oversight." She looked up, her tone calm. "Oversight slows reaction time. Reaction time saves lives." "That's the problem," he said, almost gently. "You're right, but the people who sign off on your budget don't care about right. They care about control." Sarah didn't flinch. Control doesn't stop intrusions, vigilance does. Keating smiled faintly, the way soldiers sometimes do when they recognize a familiar stubbornness. "You sound like I did 30 years ago. Just be careful. Bureaucracy doesn't forgive conviction." She gave a small, wry smile. "Neither do adversaries." When he left, she stayed behind. The rain outside thickened, muting the sound of distant traffic. Her reflection stared back at her, eyes tired, jaw set. For the first time since Norfolk, she wondered how long she could keep doing this. How long before the fight she believed in became the same machine she once despised. 2 days later, her team assembled for a new operation, Project Meridian, a joint audit with the Air Force. The assignment: assess vulnerabilities at a classified satellite uplink facility in Colorado. The flight west was quiet. Most of her team used the time to sleep, but Sarah didn't. Her eyes stayed on the window, watching the clouds roll beneath the aircraft like slow-moving waves. When they landed, the base was already awake. Snow clung to the mountains like frozen smoke. The facility itself was buried deep inside one of those ridges. Steel doors, reinforced walls, and the constant hum of power that spoke of something vast hidden below. "Welcome, Dr. Brennan," said Colonel Mason, the base commander. "We've been briefed on your scope. You'll find our security posture sound." "I look forward to testing that," Sarah replied with a polite smile. He chuckled, a little forced. "I suppose that's why you're here." Her team began the assessment immediately. The deeper they went, the more the facility revealed itself: redundant systems, triple-layer encryption, strict physical access controls. On paper, everything was perfect. And yet perfection always bothered her. She learned that systems boasting flawlessness often hid the biggest cracks. By the second night, those cracks began to show. Minor inconsistencies in time-stamped records, a missing log file from 2 weeks ago. When she asked about it, the tech officer shrugged. "Routine purge. We archive after 90 days. "Show me the archive." He hesitated. "It's restricted." Sarah smiled slightly. "So am I." Within minutes, she found what she needed. The purge hadn't been routine, it was selective. Specific user sessions had been removed. "Someone's editing history again," she murmured. Her deputy analyst, a young woman named Lena Cho, leaned in. "You think it's another cover-up?" Sarah's tone was quiet, reflective. "I think the truth always hides in the quiet parts of data." They followed the traces late into the night. This time, the path didn't lead outward, it led inward. Someone had manipulated satellite telemetry data, rerouting small signal discrepancies through test nodes, making it appear like routine calibration. But those discrepancies weren't random. They formed a pattern. "Someone's piggybacking on our own transmissions," Sarah said softly. "A signal within a signal." Lena frowned. "To send what?" "Encrypted packets. Low bandwidth, but enough for reconnaissance. Someone's using our satellites as a relay." Sarah leaned back, her pulse steady but sharp. The implications were staggering. Whoever it was, they weren't breaching the system, they were using it, hiding in plain sight. She turned to her team. "No alerts, no reports, not yet. We trace this ourselves." By morning, fatigue had set in. The snow outside was blinding, sunlight scattering across white ridges like glass shards. Inside the operations room, tension hummed like electricity. They'd traced the internal origin of the rerouted signals to a classified research department operating under Project Atlas. On paper, it was part of the facility's engineering division, but access was sealed. When Sarah requested entry, Colonel Mason declined. "Project Atlas is compartmentalized. You don't have clearance." She met his gaze evenly. "My clearance covers all compartments." He hesitated, then said, "You'll need to go through channels." "Channels are what get us compromised." The silence stretched. Finally he said, "I'll make a call." She waited 10 minutes, 15. When he returned, his face was pale. "Dr. Brennan, you're authorized." The Project Atlas lab was buried 3 levels down. The moment the door opened, Sarah understood why they hadn't wanted her here. Rows of computers, racks of classified hardware, screens alive with streams of code, and in the center, an AI-driven signal analysis system. Its digital display pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. "Meet Archer," said one of the scientists. "Adaptive reconnaissance and communications heuristic engine, designed for real-time data correction." Sarah studied the machine. "It's rewriting telemetry autonomously." "Yes," the scientist said proudly. "It improves network integrity." "No," she said quietly, "it compromises it." The man frowned. "Excuse me." "By rewriting live telemetry, you're masking external signal interference. You've built a system that can hide intrusions, not reveal them." He blinked. "That's not how it's designed." "Intent doesn't matter," she said, voice steady. "Results do." Within hours, her suspicion was confirmed. Archer's adaptive code had misclassified foreign signal probes as benign noise. For months, adversaries had been observing U.S. satellite operations, undetected. When she presented her findings to Mason, his reaction wasn't relief, it was fear. "This can't leave the room," he said. "It already has," Sarah replied. "The moment you deployed that system, it became part of the network." "You don't understand," he said, stepping closer. "The technology came from higher up, research contracts, political backers. If this goes public—" She interrupted softly, "Then people learn from it." He shook his head. "People lose their careers over it." Sarah looked at him for a long moment, then said, "And others lose their security because of it." He didn't respond. That night she sat alone in her quarters, staring at the dark window. Snow drifted past the glass, catching the light like falling ash. Her report was nearly finished, but she hadn't sent it. Every word she wrote felt heavier than the last. Every paragraph another potential weapon in the wrong hands. She remembered Pierce's words in Guam about loyalty and bending rules, about how principles could become obstacles when the stakes were high enough. For the first time, she understood how people like him justified it. When the call came from Admiral Keating, she answered on the first ring. "Status?" he asked. "I found something," she said. "Something big. An AI system rewriting telemetry. It's masking foreign interference." He was silent for a long moment. "Does Mason know you're reporting this?" "Yes." "Then expect pushback." "I already have." He sighed. "I'll handle the politics. You handle the truth." The call ended. Sarah stared at the phone for a long time. 2 days later, the official review team arrived. Civilian suits, polite smiles, empty reassurances. Sarah briefed them formally, outlining her findings with the precision of someone who had long learned to separate emotion from evidence. When she finished, the lead reviewer, a man with perfect posture and perfectly rehearsed neutrality, said, "We'll classify this under internal evaluation. Minimal disclosure." Sarah met his gaze. Minimal disclosure means minimal correction. He smiled thinly. "Correction is a political decision, doctor." After they left, she returned to the lab. The machines were silent now, Archer's core deactivated. The room felt hollow, stripped of its heartbeat. Lena approached quietly. "You think they'll bury it?" Sarah didn't look up. "They'll rebrand it, rename it, call it Phase 2 or Enhanced Integration. Bureaucracy doesn't destroy mistakes, it evolves them." Lena hesitated. "Then why keep fighting?" Sarah finally looked at her, and in that moment her voice softened. "Because fighting reminds us what side we're on." That night she took one last walk through the facility. The air was cold, her breath a faint mist in the dim corridor lights. She passed security officers, engineers, analysts, each absorbed in their own worlds, each believing they were part of something unbreakable. She knew better. Systems broke, people broke, ideals cracked under pressure, but conviction, quiet, unglamorous conviction, that survived. Outside, the wind howled across the ridges, carrying the distant hum of the generator fields. She closed her eyes, listening. Every sound here, the static, the hum, the low rumble of the earth, reminded her why she stayed. Not for recognition, not for victory, but for prevention, for the fragile peace bought by vigilance. Her phone buzzed, a secure message from Keating. "Good work, report acknowledged. We'll pursue containment quietly." She read it twice, then deleted it. Quietly, always quietly. As she turned back toward the facility, her reflection caught in the glass of the reinforced door, a lone figure framed by cold light and deeper shadow. And somewhere deep inside her, a thought surfaced, unbidden, weary but certain. Sometimes, the enemy isn't the one trying to break in. It's the one telling you not to look too closely. Why did betrayal always come from the places that felt safe? The message came just after midnight, an encrypted alert, unsigned, routed through a relay Sarah had personally built for internal whistleblowing. The subject line was simple: "You're being watched." She stared at it for a long moment, the glow of the monitor painting her face in cold blue light. Her apartment was silent, the city outside muffled by rain. She typed a quick trace command, nothing. Whoever sent it knew how to cover their tracks. A soft knock at her door broke the silence. She checked the peephole before unlocking it. Commander Vasquez stood there, coat damp, expression grim. "Did you get it too?" Sarah asked. Vasquez nodded. "Two of my team leads were pulled for questioning this afternoon. Internal Affairs says they're auditing our communications." Sarah stepped aside, motioning her in. "Sit, tell me everything." Vasquez removed her gloves, dropping them on the table. "They think we leaked the Meridian report, the one on the AI masking breach. Someone posted excerpts on a private defense forum." Sarah frowned. "That report was top secret. Only 5 people had clearance." Vasquez met her eyes, "Including us." The weight of that truth hung in the air. Sarah walked to the window, looking out at the dark skyline. "If the leak's real, someone wants to discredit us, make it look like we're the security risk." Vasquez's voice lowered. "Or silence you before the next audit." Sarah turned. "What do you mean?" "Word is, they're freezing your next operation. Pentagon Oversight wants to reevaluate your protocols. That's code for grounding you." Sarah didn't respond. She just exhaled slowly, like someone absorbing a hit she'd already expected. "Of course they do." Vasquez hesitated. "What are you going to do?" Sarah's gaze hardened. "My job." By morning, she was at headquarters, early enough to beat the rush, late enough to seem calm. The building was sterile, humming with recycled air and tension that never seemed to leave. At her desk, she found a printed memo waiting, subject, temporary suspension of operational authority. Her fingers traced the word slowly, temporary, bureaucratic euphemism for indefinite. She folded the paper neatly, then tucked it into her bag. As she turned to leave, her phone buzzed, an internal message from her lead analyst, Lena. "Can we talk privately? Urgent." 10 minutes later, they met in the sublevel data room, dim, cold, filled with the constant hum of cooling fans. Lena looked nervous, her eyes darting toward the cameras. "They're saying the leak came from me," she whispered. "But I swear I didn't." Sarah studied her carefully. Lena's fear was real, the trembling hands, the uneven breathing. But fear could be faked too. "I believe you," Sarah said softly. Lena's eyes widened. "You do?" Sarah nodded. "But belief doesn't stop an investigation. I need proof." "I can get it," Lena said quickly. "If you give me access back to the secure logs, I can show who modified the file timestamps." Sarah hesitated. She was being watched. Granting access would look like collusion. But if she didn't, Lena would be crucified by process. Finally, she said, "You have 1 hour. After that, revoke your own credentials and wipe the cache." Lena nodded, determination returning to her face. "Thank you." As she left, Sarah sat alone in the cold hum of the server room, her thoughts circling like silent alarms. Someone inside was playing a deeper game, a political one. The worst part, she didn't know who. The answer came 3 days later, not through data but through absence. Lena didn't show up for the morning briefing. Her access card was deactivated. Her apartment, when security checked, was empty, no signs of struggle, no forwarding information. Vasquez called her immediately. "She's gone, Sarah. No record of transfer, nothing." Sarah's mind went cold. Check transport logs, private flights, off-books clearances. "I already did," Vasquez said quietly. "It's clean." Sarah's hand tightened on the phone. Then someone cleaned it. That evening, she went to see Admiral Keating. His office, as always, was orderly, the kind of order that came from a man who believed chaos could be controlled by sheer will. He looked up as she entered. "You shouldn't be here." "I know," she said. "That's why I came." He gestured for her to sit. "I've heard about the leak investigation. It's political noise. It'll blow over." Lena Cho disappeared, she said quietly. "No trace, no orders." His expression changed barely but enough. "You're sure?" "Completely." He leaned back, sighing. "Then someone's using your division as a scapegoat, again." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "You sound like you expected this." Keating hesitated. "Let's just say certain people never wanted your division to exist. You've embarrassed too many commands, the Pierce case, the AI exposure. They want the message to be clear. If you dig too deep, you disappear." Sarah felt the room tilt slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of understanding. "Then we're not just fighting external threats anymore." "No," he said softly. "You're fighting the institution itself." She stood slowly. "Then it's time to change tactics." That night she met Vasquez in a parking garage, rain dripping steadily from the concrete above. They stood beside an unmarked SUV, the sound of distant traffic muffled and strange. Sarah handed her a flash drive. Backup data from the Meridian and Atlas audits, raw files, nothing sanitized. Vasquez looked at it like it might burn. "You want me to hold this?" "I need it off the grid. If they shut me down, this survives." "You're not seriously thinking about going rogue?" "I'm thinking about finishing what we started." Vasquez exhaled, tension bleeding into her voice. "Sarah, they'll destroy you." "They already are," Sarah said. "The difference is I'm still standing." For a long time, neither spoke. The hum of rain on metal filled the silence. Finally, Vasquez pocketed the drive. If this goes wrong. It already has, Sarah interrupted. Then softer, just make sure someone remembers why. The next day, Sarah received a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was filtered, almost mechanical. You're close to something you don't understand, Dr. Brennan. She stayed silent, letting the voice continue. You think this is about Pierce or Mason. It's not. You've touched an operation that predates your clearance. Walk away. Still silence. Then she asked quietly, "Who are you?" The line went dead. For the next 48 hours, she didn't sleep. She combed through old encrypted logs, archived audits, redacted memos, forgotten metadata. Patterns began to form, threads pulling together. The AI masking system from Project Atlas, the erased logs in Guam, the selective deletions at Norfolk. Different bases, different years, same protocol signatures. Someone wasn't just exploiting vulnerabilities, someone was designing them. A controlled network of weakness, built deliberately into classified systems, a backdoor. Her pulse slowed as realization settled in. These weren't breaches, they were permissions. She printed the data, page after page, until the table was covered. Then she called Vasquez. I found it, she said, all of it. Vasquez's voice came through tense. You need to get out of that building right now. They'll come for those files. Sarah gathered the pages, sliding them into a sealed envelope. She moved fast, calm, precise. But before she could reach the elevator, two men in plain suits stepped out. Dr. Brennan, one said, voice flat, we need you to come with us. Under whose authority? Office of Internal Affairs. Questions about classified disclosures. She didn't resist. She'd known this moment was coming. They led her down a silent hallway to a windowless room. One table, two chairs, no clock. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time lost meaning in places built to strip it away. Finally, the door opened. A man in a dark suit entered, older, expression unreadable. You've made quite a career out of embarrassing the Navy, he said. And now, it seems, you've crossed into something bigger than you realize. Sarah met his eyes. I realize more than you think. He studied her for a long moment. You're loyal, doctor, that's your flaw. Loyalty isn't a flaw, she said quietly. It's just dangerous when it's not convenient. The man smiled thinly. You'll be placed on administrative leave, effective immediately, access revoked, equipment confiscated. Of course, she said, but that won't stop what's already in motion. He paused, sensing the confidence beneath her calm. What did you do? Sarah's voice was steady. Insurance. She was escorted out of the building just as dawn began to rise. The city felt foreign, pale light spilling over wet asphalt, the world moving as if nothing had changed. But everything had. In a quiet apartment across town, Commander Vasquez powered on a secure terminal. The flash drive Sarah had given her unlocked automatically. Files began uploading to an off-grid relay, encrypted under layers of misdirection. Sarah watched from her car, parked across the street, eyes on the faint glow behind Vasquez's window. She didn't smile. She didn't relax. She just watched the way she always did until the light went dark again. Then she whispered to herself, you can take away access, not conviction. As she drove away, the morning sun broke weakly through the clouds, painting the horizon in pale gold. For the first time in years, she didn't know what came next. But she knew one thing with absolute clarity. Truth had a cost, and she was still willing to pay it. Why did doing the right thing always feel like treason? The city was quieter now, or maybe she just stopped hearing it the same way. Sarah Brennan had been officially suspended for 7 days, but she already felt like she'd been gone for years. The corridors of power moved on without her, meetings, memos, decisions made by people who never stayed long enough to bear the consequences. But Sarah had never been one of them. She'd been the one called in when things broke, when invisible hands slipped through firewalls and protocols like ghosts in code. And now, those same ghosts were coming from inside. She lived in shadows now, an apartment paid for in cash, a phone scrubbed of any link to her identity, a laptop she'd assembled from spare parts bought at flea markets. Every keystroke routed through layers of encryption that would take months to trace. And still, it wasn't enough. The system she'd built her life defending had turned inward, its algorithms of control now aimed at her. Some nights she wondered if this was how it always ended for people like her, not with explosions or glory, but with silence. At 2:43 a.m. her laptop pinged, a signal brief, encrypted, untraceable. The header was a code phrase she hadn't seen in years, Echo 9. Her heart skipped. That was her old Air Force designation, used only by one person, Captain Eric Lang. She decrypted the packet. You were right, they're not just building backdoors, they're using them. You need to see this in person. Safe house coordinates below, burn after reading. Sarah leaned back, staring at the message. Lang had vanished 5 years ago after a mission in Qatar went wrong, officially discharged, unofficially erased. If he was reaching out now, it meant whatever he'd found was too big to send digitally. She memorized the coordinates, then deleted the message, overwriting the memory sectors 3 times before shutting the laptop. She sat in the dark for a long moment, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. Then she stood, grabbed her coat and walked out. The safe house was an abandoned weather monitoring station tucked into the Blue Ridge Mountains. She arrived at dawn, the fog curling through the trees like old breath. The building was gray, silent, half swallowed by vines. Inside, the air smelled of rust and dust. Then she heard it, the faint click of a weapon chambering a round. "Close the door," a voice said. She did. From the shadows, a figure stepped forward, older, leaner, but unmistakably Eric Lang. His beard was flecked with gray, his eyes tired but alert. "Sarah Brennan," he said softly, "didn't think you'd actually come." "Didn't think you were still alive," she replied. He gave a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. Alive is relative these days. They sat at a table littered with old maps, cables, and half-broken electronics. Lang poured coffee from a dented thermos and slid a cup across to her. "You've been busy," he said. "Norfolk, Guam, Colorado, you're making friends everywhere." "I'm making enemies," she corrected. "It's faster." He chuckled, still sharp. Then his face hardened. "What I'm about to show you, it's what got me burned, and if they knew you were here, you'd be next." He powered on a small laptop, its interface stripped to raw command lines. A data file appeared, encrypted with military-grade keys. "This," he said, "is part of an old program, predecessor to the AI system you exposed, Archer. Back then it was called SBEARPOINT. It wasn't just for monitoring networks. It was designed to embed deliberate weaknesses, permanent entry nodes disguised as safety protocols." Sarah frowned. "You're saying they built vulnerabilities into our systems?" Lang nodded. "For flexibility," they said, "to maintain access in case of emergencies. But over time, those flexible pathways became something else. Contractors started selling them. Private sectors bought fragments of the code. Intelligence agencies used them for operations they couldn't admit existed." He brought up a map, hundreds of red dots across the globe. "Each one," he said, "a compromised node still active, not foreign, ours." Sarah's throat tightened. "So the breaches I found, they weren't accidents?" "No, they were maintenance." She leaned back slowly, the full scope hitting her like pressure in her chest. "Who authorized this?" Lang looked away. "You don't want that answer." "I already do," she said quietly. He sighed, then turned the screen. A single name glowed in the center of a classified memo, ADM, James Kading. The air left the room. Sarah stared at it, unblinking, unreadable. That's impossible. Lang shook his head. He was there from the beginning. SBEARPOINT was his baby. He believed in proactive defense, preemptive surveillance embedded in everything. Then it spiraled. Too many hands, too many agendas. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. He's the one who pulled me out of the fog at Norfolk. He gave me this mission. Maybe he still believes he's protecting something, Lang said softly. Or maybe he's just protecting himself. Silence filled the room, the kind that stretches until it hurts. Finally, Sarah said, "Why show me this?" "Because I'm done running," Lang said. "And because you're the only one who can expose it without losing everything." She studied him. "You're asking me to betray the man who saved my career." "I'm asking you to save your conscience." They spent the next 12 hours cross-referencing the files, fragmented code, project memos, deleted communications. Every line pointed back to the same network. SBEARPOINT had evolved quietly into the modern cyber defense architecture. Every command Sarah had ever audited was part of it. Lang rubbed his temples. "You know what this means, right? Every assessment you ran, every vulnerability you found, he already knew. He was watching through you." Sarah's stomach turned. "No, he wouldn't." "Wouldn't he?" Lang asked quietly. "Every time you flagged an intrusion, did he ever seem surprised? Or did he always know more than he should?" She thought of Keating's calm voice, his quiet concern, his reassurance that she was doing good work. She thought of how he'd always had the perfect answer, the perfect timing, the perfect trust. It wasn't trust, it was control. She closed the laptop slowly. If this is true, then the entire fleet network is compromised by design. Every defense system we've built, it's a mirror. Lang nodded grimly. "And if the wrong people trigger it, we won't even see the invasion coming." Sarah stood, walking to the window. The fog outside had thickened again, curling around the trees like smoke. "We need to leak it." Lang looked up sharply. "If you go public, they'll discredit you, maybe worse. You'll end up like me, erased." "I can live with that," she said. "What I can't live with is silence." That night, they split the data into fragments, encrypting each with unique keys. Sarah's portion would go through independent journalists in Europe, people she trusted from old intelligence contacts. Lang would handle the rest through dark relay servers, distributing evidence across anonymous nodes. When it was done, Lang sat back, exhaustion etched into his face. "It's out of our hands now." Sarah looked at him. "That's what scares me." He gave a tired smile. "You always hated losing control." "I never had it," she said. "I just learned how to look like I did." They shared a brief silence, the kind only people who have spent their lives in shadows can understand. Then Lang said quietly, "If they come, don't wait." "I won't," she lied. They came before dawn. Sarah was awake, watching the horizon pale, when she heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Black SUVs, unmarked, moving fast. She grabbed the drives, sliding one into her jacket, the rest into a lead-lined pouch. Lang was already on his feet, rifle in hand. "Go," he said. "They're not here to talk." "I'm not leaving you," she said. "You don't have a choice." He handed her a small key, metal, simple, cold. "Vault's behind the generator room. If I don't make it, you know what to do." "Eric." "Go." The sound of boots hit the gravel outside. Sarah moved fast, ducking through a side corridor as shouts broke through the walls. 2 bursts of gunfire. The echo bounced down the hallway like thunder. She found the vault, an old maintenance panel masking a steel hatch. The key fit perfectly. Inside was a narrow tunnel leading into the forest. She turned once, saw the flash of light through the window, heard another gunshot, then nothing. Her breath caught, but she kept moving, step after step, until the forest swallowed her whole. Hours later, she emerged near a remote gas station, clothes torn, hair damp with sweat. She found a payphone, one of the last in the county, and dialed a memorized number. "Vasquez," came the voice. "It's me," Sarah said softly. "Where the hell are you?" "Alive," she said. "Lang's gone. We were right, it all leads back to Keating." Silence, then Vasquez whispered, "Sarah, you can't prove that." "I don't need to," she said. "The truth's already out." "Out where?" Sarah glanced at the horizon, the faint glow of sunrise pushing against the clouds. "Everywhere." She hung up before Vasquez could respond. For a long time she stood there, the payphone receiver swaying gently in the morning wind. Then she walked away one step at a time, fading into the anonymity she'd spent her life mastering. Behind her, the world would soon wake to headlines that shouldn't exist, files that couldn't be ignored, questions that would echo in every corner of command. And somewhere, in a quiet Pentagon office, Admiral James Keating would look out at the dawn and realize his protégé had turned the system he built against him. That night, miles away, Sarah sat in a cheap motel room, staring at the faint light leaking through the blinds. She'd lost everything, her career, her safety, the only man who'd ever understood her mission. But she'd kept her soul intact. She whispered to the silence, not as confession but as creed. Sometimes, to defend something worth saving, you have to burn what's been built around it. The neon light flickered once, then steadied. Outside, the world kept turning. And Sarah Brennan, invisible, relentless, unbroken, prepared for whatever came next. Why did the end never feel like victory? The storm hit Washington 3 days after the leaks went public. By then, half the intelligence community was already on fire. Headlines screamed betrayal. Networks broadcast words no one had dared to say out loud in decades: domestic surveillance, compromised systems, cyber manipulation by design. And threaded through it all was one name whispered like a ghost: Dr. Sarah Brennan. To some, she was a whistleblower. To others, a traitor. To those who knew better, the quiet professionals still holding the line in 1,000 unseen places, she was a reminder that integrity still had a cost. She watched it unfold from a small cabin near the Potomac, a place she'd chosen for its invisibility. The news feeds flickered on an old monitor. She didn't look triumphant. She looked tired. Her reflection stared back at her from the dark window, pale and worn but alive. That counted for something. On the desk beside her lay the last remnants of her old life: an expired duty badge, her old Air Force pin, and a single folded note written in Eric Lang's handwriting. She hadn't opened it yet. She didn't need to. Some goodbyes didn't require words. The rain fell steady against the tin roof, like a rhythm her heart had learned to follow. Then came the knock. 2 sharp raps, controlled, familiar. Sarah froze, instinct kicking in before thought. She turned off the monitor, swept the files from the desk, and waited. A pause, then a voice low, measured, unmistakable. "Sarah, it's me." She exhaled, tension shifting into something heavier. Admiral James Keating stood on the porch, rain streaking down his coat. No security detail, no entourage, just him. When she opened the door, they faced each other in silence, the storm raging behind him, the past between them. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. "I could say the same," he replied. She stepped aside. "Come in before someone sees you." He entered slowly, scanning the room with the instinct of a man who'd spent a lifetime measuring risk. When his eyes landed on the folded note, his expression flickered. "You got him killed," she said before he could speak. Keating's jaw tightened. He was already dead the moment he resurfaced. "You know how this works." "No," Sarah said. "That's how you made it work." He removed his cap, setting it on the table beside the badge. "You leaked classified material. Do you have any idea what that's done?" "Do you?" she asked, voice sharp. "Do you know how many years we've been building walls made of lies? How many people we've turned into suspects just so a handful of men could feel safe in their control?" Keating's eyes hardened. Control keeps chaos in check. Control created the chaos, she snapped. You built SBEARPOINT. You let it evolve into something no one could stop. You turned our defense systems into weapons aimed at our own people. He didn't deny it. That hurt more than if he had. He sighed, the sound long and weary. It started differently. You think I wanted this? Back then, the threat was real: foreign networks, asymmetric warfare, disinformation campaigns. We needed a way to stay ahead. SBEARPOINT was meant to protect us. And then, she asked. And then people got comfortable, he said quietly. They started using it for convenience, then politics, then profit. I tried to contain it. You think I enjoyed watching it grow into something I couldn't control? Sarah studied him, her anger cooling into something colder. You could have stopped it. I tried, he said, his voice breaking for the first time. But power doesn't vanish once it's created. It adapts. It hides behind committees and contractors and plausible deniability. You think your leak destroyed the machine. It just changed its shape. She turned away, walking toward the window. The storm outside blurred the lights of the same city that once believed in her. So why are you here? She asked. Keating hesitated. To tell you what comes next. She glanced back. Is that a threat? No, he said softly. It's a warning. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. There are people who want to make an example of you. Some of them wear uniforms, some don't. But there's one thing they all agree on: you can't come back. Sarah let the words hang in the air. I wasn't planning to. I know. He reached into his coat, pulling out a small envelope. These are sealed orders, official exoneration under whistleblower provisions. It won't make you a hero, but it'll keep you alive. She didn't take it. Why now? Because despite everything, he said, I still believe in what you were trying to do. You exposed something that needed to be seen. But you also opened a wound the country isn't ready to treat. She folded her arms. So this is damage control. It's mercy, he said. The word hit harder than she expected. She looked at him, really looked at him, and for a moment she saw the man she'd once trusted, the mentor who'd given her purpose, the admiral who'd walked through fog just to meet her at a gate. You used me, she said, from the start. I guided you, he said quietly. There's a difference. Her eyes softened, not with forgiveness, but with understanding. You wanted a weapon who thought she was a shield. He didn't answer. The storm outside eased into a steady drizzle, the sound filling the silence between them. Finally, Sarah spoke. You know what I realized, Admiral? Every system we build, digital, human, institutional, eventually starts protecting itself instead of what it was built for. That's when people like us have to choose. Choose what? Whether to stay inside the walls or start tearing them down. Keating's voice was quiet. And where does that leave you? She turned back toward the window, outside. He left just before dawn. No handshake, no farewell, just a nod that carried a lifetime of unspoken truths. When his footsteps faded, Sarah finally opened the envelope. Inside was a single document stamped classified, authorized clearance termination. Her name was crossed out, her file closed. It wasn't mercy, it was erasure. She smiled faintly, fitting. A week later, she was gone from Washington. The leaks had shifted global policy. Investigations opened, agencies restructured, oversight committees formed. None of it would last. Sarah knew that. Systems repaired themselves faster than conscience. But somewhere in the noise, a spark had caught, small, quiet, persistent. Young officers requesting transparency. Analysts refusing to sign off on gray areas. New recruits whispering her name in training rooms, not as a warning but as a question. What would Dr. Brennan do? That was enough. She settled in a coastal town where no one knew her history. She rented a small cottage overlooking the sea, her life reduced to simplicity. Coffee at dawn, walks on the shore, the occasional encrypted message from someone who still believed. Her days were quiet now, but the habit never left, checking the locks, scanning the skyline for patterns, reading between silences. The war had changed shape, but it hadn't ended. One evening, while sorting through old drives, she found a single message that had somehow survived every purge. From Corporal Derek Martinez, the young guard from that foggy morning years ago. "Ma'am, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I just wanted to say thank you. After that day at the checkpoint, I got promoted. I tell my new guys that sometimes the hardest orders are the right ones, even when you don't understand them. You taught me that. Hope you're doing okay out there." Sarah stared at the message for a long time. The memory came back, the cold air, the fog, the confusion, and then the look on those young soldiers' faces when they realized who she was. She remembered what she'd told them. Never apologize for doing your job right. She smiled, the first real smile in months. Outside, the sea stretched endless and indifferent. But in its rhythm, the crash and retreat, the endless motion, she heard something familiar. Persistence. She walked down to the shore, the wind tugging at her coat. The horizon burned faintly with the last colors of sunset, gold fading into gray. She knelt, touching the wet sand, feeling the earth's quiet pulse beneath her hand. For the first time, she didn't think about what came next. The world would keep turning, threats would evolve, systems would rise and fall. But somewhere in the quiet between tides, truth still mattered. She stood, looking out over the water, her silhouette sharp against the dying light. The voice that came next was barely audible, more breath than sound. The kind of words meant only for herself, and maybe the world she'd spent her life protecting. "Sometimes," she whispered, "dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." The wind carried her words into the horizon, where they dissolved like mist, unseen, unheard but real. And as night fell over the coast, Sarah Brennan, once an invisible guardian of invisible wars, finally let herself breathe. No medals, no recognition, no witnesses. Just the truth, quiet and alive, moving forward with the tide.